Great.
Everyone. My name is Dr. Deidre Sorrell. I am a licensed professional counselor and school psychologist, and also Mrs. Black Maryland International Ambassador 2020. Welcome to another episode of Managing Anxiety in the Storm, where I talk about all things anxiety, but also other mental health issues that are relevant to today. So today I am so pleased to have a wonderful guest on my show. Her name is Dr. Natalie Jones, PsyD, LPC. She is a therapist. She is a relationships expert. She is also an expert on narcissism. And her practice is in Oakland, California. So I have a guest from all the way across the country. I am so glad and so excited to have her here. And she's also, let me not forget, the creator and host of A Date with Darkness podcast, where she talks about mental health issues and just all types of situations that we deal with in relationships. So without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Jones. Hello, hello.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you having me on here. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. This is wonderful. Narcissism is something that is, I feel, so misunderstood, just amongst lay people. We sort of think it's the person who takes a lot of selfies, or the person who's always looking in a mirror or fixing their hair or whatever. But I'm glad that we're going to have this show that we can really break it down and really just try to get everyone to understand what narcissism really is.
Mm-hmm.
So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to becoming a narcissism expert?
Yeah, yes. So I'm, as you said, Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I've been doing therapy since 2008. And, during the time that I've had therapy, being a grad student, being all those things, you just have life is like a journey, and you have all of these lessons. You may encounter people that are narcissistic. I know I did, both in education, where I worked, in romantic life, family life, you name it, I've got it. So when I first started out as a therapist, I started out doing work with a lot of high profile cases of severe abuse or death of children, and other family members and things like that, just cases that would blow your mind. So I feel like narcissism, antisocial personality, borderline personality, all of those things came to me right from the very, very beginning when I was a young budding therapist. Plus I was kind of going through all of these other life transitions. And so it just kept coming. I kept having people come to me with these kind of issues, whether they were on one end of the spectrum, meaning that they were narcissists themselves, or if they were on the opposite end of the spectrum, which was that they felt as though they were being victimized by a narcissist in their life. So there was a lot of that in where I worked, which was EAP, partial hospitalization, inpatient, all kinds of stuff, residential treatment. And then so later on, when I went back to school to get my PsyD, I had a personal experience with the ex-boyfriend that kind of turned my world upside down, and it just it really caused me to question a lot of things, and just it just wasn't a good time. And I had actually thought about leaving the field of counseling altogether, and I'm glad I didn't, because that's when I kind of went to the forensic aspect. So I started working with corrections, with inmates, and I started also doing a lot of work with, again, probation, pretrial, border parole stuff, again, where I'm working with people who actually are in the legal system for, crimes against persons, or, just kind of doing all of these things with people. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then I started doing my own research I did my own, I did my dissertation study. It was a qualitative study where I had interviewed African American women who grew up being psychologically abused by their parents. And so that was also another thing that kind of cemented it, because in that study, they definitely talked about a lot of narcissistic acts and, just how, their home environment led them to be who they are today. And unfortunately, a lot of these women who had gone through abuse were still continuing to go through abuse, even as a grown woman. So I talked about the long-term impact of that type of abuse and how women are susceptible to be in unhealthy relationships as they get older, because your brain has been wired from a very early age to kind of be attached to these people, whether logically you know it or not. There's something about your brain, it's almost like a magnet, if you will, that attracts these toxic personalities.
That is fascinating. Fascinating. And the thing is, the more research that I do in narcissism, I've learned that in the when you're dealing with people who commit these heinous crimes, these serial killers, these abusers, and many of them are narcissistic. Many of them would qualify for that narcissistic personality disorder diagnosis. Yeah, so very, very fascinating. So tell us, what is narcissism? Is it more than just looking in the mirror and taking a bunch of selfies and putting it on social media?
Yeah. So there's different types of narcissism, and then the way we use narcissism in our culture, like that word, it's like a buzzword now, is traditionally not meant to be used that way. So it's something totally different than someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder versus when we say, my ex is narcissistic or what have you. And so basically, that word has been used to encompass all behaviors that are deemed to be like, he's an asshole. I hope I can say that on the show. He's an asshole. And so, or she's an asshole or whatever. And so people want to take a word and just, when you say, oh, so-and-so is narcissistic, they feel like everything encompasses that, whether what they're really saying is this person actually has some narcissistic traits, because there's very few people that are just purely narcissistic, as the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual in psychiatric disorders tells us, basically the DSM-5. They describe to 2.5 to 1% of the population actually has the true narcissistic personality disorder. And so when we say, again, it occurs on a spectrum, right? So narcissism is on a spectrum. So what that means is that we all have some elements of narcissism. I do, you do, the person sitting next to you does. But we can say, for simplicity's sake, it's mild, medium, and moderate. So when you have someone like what you were talking about before, that is a healthy form of narcissism, typically, where it's like, oh, I look good today, or I did a really good job, and I'm really feeling myself like that today. So that's mild. That's a form of healthy narcissism. Where we get into trouble, or the ones that we notice the most, are the ones that are on the high or severe range of narcissism. And that's what you encounter with people that are like getting caught up in the correctional systems and what have you. So with people who have narcissistic personality disorder, you're going to see them having this grandiose ideas about themselves and other people. They consider themselves to be extremely special or extremely brilliant or extremely good looking. There is a paranoia that kind of goes with the narcissist, in that they believe that other people want what they have, or they're jealous of me because I am so great. So a lot of times what will happen is there's just like this paranoia that this person is out to get me because they're so jealous of me, or this person is out to take my wife because they see how good we look together and they don't want that, right? And that's also part of techniques called gaslighting, where people are just, their paranoia, again, there's nothing to really substantiate what they're saying, but they're just so caught up in it, and what they, if they believe it, then it has to be true. The other piece too would be the lack of empathy with folks who have narcissistic personality disorder. They do not empathize with emotions. There is a bit of controversy around whether or not people who are truly narcissistic can display empathy. And the last study I read is that they can, they just choose not to.
Oh.
Other things that, you know, you may notice would be excessive lying, extremely manipulative behavior. So again, that kind of goes hand in hand with the lack of empathy, because truly what you're going to see is a person who's not capable of building a healthy relationship, but they are going to mimic being able to build a healthy relationship in order to get their needs met. So
Wow.
that comes across as like, you know, I'm going to pretend to be someone who you need me to be, someone that actually has the same goals. I'm going to talk the talk, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to walk the walk, because as soon as I get what I want, I'm out of there, and I don't care about how you feel.
Wow. So it's
Right?
almost like they wear a mask in a sense.
It is definitely a mask. It is definitely a mask. And, you know, there's studies that show that, you know, narcissists feel empty on the inside and whatnot. There's some disagreements among that. But, you know, I think those are the major hallmark characteristics. They will often do things impulsively. They will do things that border on the line of illegal. Now, there's some controversy around this too, because the thing that's supposed to set antisocial personality and narcissistic personality disorders apart is that antisocial do not care about breaking the rules. The rules don't apply to them, which also has an element of narcissism to them. Traditionally speaking, in the past, narcissists were supposed to be able to, you know, do these heinous things, but they would shy away from the letter of the law. In other words, they wouldn't get themselves into a predicament where they're breaking the law and they have to be incarcerated, whereas antisocial doesn't care. More and more, we're starting to see that that's not true, that narcissism will do whatever they want, regardless of who it hurts.
Wow, wow.
Yeah,
So with that, they may feel that they're above the law. Like, well, I'm so
they do.
special that I'll,
They do. The rules do not apply to me. I'm above the law. If I want something or someone or situation, it's mine. I don't have to ask for it. I'm going to take it. So there's a lot of destructive behavior. And, you know, one of the telltale signs of a narcissist is that they do not have stable relationships.
Mm.
Very few have stable relationships. So and the reason when they start to get into a new relationship with someone, they are either the victim or they're the white knight, right? So you know, when you connect with someone and it's like, whoa, all these people did all these things to me, and, you know, I was just a helpless little lamb. Or you might hear someone with the white knight syndrome, like, oh, I saved my wife. I saved her because, you know, she beat me and she didn't have any place to go, but I gave her all this money and did all this and that. And so it's a constant running theme. They're either one or the other, or sometimes both as well, but they always portray themselves to be the good guy and the best, or good person and the best at everything.
Wow. Wow. Fascinating.
Yes.
So that brings me to the next question. What is it like dating or marrying a narcissist?
There's, you know, it can be very troubling. I talk a lot about this on the podcast. Um, you know, narcissists usually enter in a relationship with an agenda, right? They usually want something. You may not know that because you're getting caught up. So a lot of times when you are in a relationship with a narcissist, the one thing most people get caught up in is the charm. The
Oh.
charm, being good looking. He or she is saying all the right things that I want to hear. We're on the same page. We have the same beliefs. And so things, getting into that relationship in the beginning could definitely seem like a whirlwind romance, right? It's like, oh gosh, we're moving super fast. We're having sex on the first date. We're moving in together after a couple of weeks. We're getting married, you know, after 3 months of knowing each other. Or there's a lot of rush to get a commitment. A narcissist wants to rush you to get a commitment. And again, that is part of like the manipulation. Like if you're going so fast, right? You don't have time to process, you don't have time to think about it. And so that's one of the ways that they kind of get you caught up and committed to them very quickly. The other thing too is that it can be very chaotic. Again, from the beginning, a lot of things may not make sense, or there could be holes in the story of a past life that they're not telling you, but that will eventually catch up. Those things are called red flags, right? And a lot of times people are upset that they missed so many of them, and they dismiss them as being nothing because they want to give this person the benefit of the doubt. They're interested in seeing where the relationship goes. So there is, but there is a fair amount of red flags. As the relationship progresses, they do finally get the commitment or whatever it is that they're looking for. Then there's going to be some acts of degradation. So they may put you down. They may be gone for long periods of time while they're starting up a relationship with another person. They may be engaging in a lot of problematic behaviors such as sex addiction, substance abuse, other things. Like you're basically going to get to see a totally different side of them. And they are very abusive typically. But what's the interesting thing is you're definitely going to get to see another side of them, and you're going to wonder where the person you met in the beginning, where did that person go? And as the person that's in the relationship, and part of the reason why you may feel like you're stuck on the hamster wheel is because you try so hard to get back what you thought it once was in the beginning, or you fight so hard to get that fantasy back, that whirlwind romance, that what have you. So you're fighting for that, and so you almost become the aggressor. The more you fight for it, the more you're pushed away. And then maybe they'll come back around and pretend like nothing is happening. So it could be just crazy stuff going on.
Wow.
And yeah, that's just a portion. A lot of that psychological. I didn't even get into the financial or the sexual aspect of it. There's so many different layers to that as well.
My goodness. Because, as women, we're socialized to, kind of romanticize getting swept off of our feet. We watch we grow up with these fairy tales and watch these movies, like I'm thinking of, this is probably a bad example, but like Love Jones. It was just like, this woman, the main character gets swept off of her feet. It's just so romantic, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, what you're saying is like one telltale warning sign, a red flag, is just things just moving too fast, and then almost this pressure to commit.
Things moving too fast, or things seems to be too good to be true. If those things are just like happening, and this person seems to be just on top of everything, bringing you flowers all the time, or doing all these extreme acts of love, and it just seems to be too much, then that's definitely a red flag there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me about the narcissistic parent, because I feel like if you have a narcissistic parent, that might make you vulnerable to choosing a narcissistic partner.
Yeah, a narcissistic parent, or even an absentee parent, is typically what I found. So a narcissistic parent, again, it can be a mom or dad, but basically what you're going to see is some of the same behaviors. However, what I will mention is, especially if you have siblings, there's going to be an attempt to split the siblings. So you're going to have a sibling here that's going to be the golden child. You're going to have a sibling over here that's more than likely going to be the scapegoat. And so what you have with the scapegoat child, that child is to blame for all of the problems that happen in the family. That child is the black sheep. They're typically ostracized and made to feel inferior. And, they can set up, the narcissistic parent can definitely set up dynamics between siblings, to whereas all of you are actually jumping on the one person that's considered to be the scapegoat or black sheep. Then there's the golden child, the favorite child. right? That child gets whatever they want. They always get the praise by the narcissistic parent. They always get the attention, whereas some of the other children can be dismissed. Again, with a narcissistic parent, you never know what you're going to get. There can be rage that just seems to come out of nowhere. And, you know, just a lot of anger, but also too, that with that particular parent, nothing you ever do is going to be good enough.
Mm. Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
So true. Wow. So can narcissists change? If a narcissist comes to therapy, which I feel would probably be rare, right?
It is rare.
Mm-hmm.
It is rare, except when treatment is usually mandated. And this is a question that I get quite a bit. Can they change? Yes, it's possible for anyone to change. Here's been my experience in working with narcissists. If they're at the moderate to severe range of the scale of narcissism, chances are they're not going to change. They're not going to do any sort of work. You know, in therapy, they're not going to take it seriously, because from a narcissist point of view, it's not my fault. It's everyone else's fault if they have a problem with me, and they need to go deal with that. But if you have someone that's on the mild end of the spectrum, absolutely treatment can work. Now, is that treatment going to look like what it would if you and I went to therapy and we're just kind of processing? No, it's not. Is the change going to be radical? Probably not. But there is some stuff that can help with a narcissism. It's almost like you've got to treat elements of it, such as the impulsive behavior or thinking about the consequences. So in my experience, utilizing DBT helps really well with learning how to regulate emotions and keep people on an even keel with narcissistic personality disorder. What I find is not very many narcissists come to treatment. And so this, in my experience, usually only works if they're mandated or they're in a control setting, like such as a correctional or jail setting where they're mandated and they have to go get the treatment. So you can have people that do process a little bit. Are they going to gain empathy? Are they going to, you know, suddenly turn into this warm, loving, fuzzy person? No. But there is some element that can be changed through the impulsivity of their actions, you know, thinking about the consequences and things of that nature.
Okay. All right. So how can people protect themselves from narcissistic abuse through a relationship or friendship, even family?
That's a good question. So there's a number of things that people can do to protect themselves. I think it starts at the very beginning of life with parenting, right? And with parenting, there's a lot of people, and again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with this, but there are a lot of people that are very protective of their children. And they don't explain things like relationships or sex. I'm not saying that's across the board, but you know, there's people that are very conservative that don't want their children to date or be exposed to too much. I think the more you can expose your children to and use it as a teaching moment, you know, if you go out and you're able to kind of screen, you know, parents can help their children screen for their friends or screen through romantic partners and sort of educate them along the way to tell them, hey, you know, this person is troubling. It may not be in your best interest to hang around this person. So I definitely think a lot of it is that at a young age. So when we get to adulthood and later adulthood, I think one of the things that we can do to protect ourselves from narcissism or from getting caught up in a web of destruction, because to be honest, people with narcissistic traits are everywhere you go, whether that be at your job or what have you. I think one of the things that we can work on is having boundaries, right? And boundaries is going to be they're going to look different, right? So just making sure that you value yourself and you put yourself first, and having those boundaries with people that have poor boundaries or that just want to use you for whatever they want to. The other thing too is if you're dating someone that you believe might be narcissistic, pump the brakes. You know, just pump the brakes. Try not to get caught up in the whirlwind, and just start to pump the brakes and really evaluate and see why this person may be rushing you or wanting you to do some things that you're not okay with, right? So pumping the brakes. Also having a social network, you know, so you definitely want to make sure that you are surrounded by friends, family, and loved ones, because chances are they're looking out for you. So they're going to tell you what they see, because they're not caught up in the bubble that you may be caught up in. And they may say, well, you know, we have some concerns and this and that and the other, which, you know, some people are receptive to that. Some people don't want to be bothered by their family because they've already been judged enough. Another way to go to, you know, process whatever you got going on with a particular person or situation, if you feel like there's some narcissism involved, is definitely talking to a therapist that is trained to do that.
Right, right, absolutely. Wow. Well, this has been very eye-opening, and I hope that everyone who's hearing this has really learned a lot from this, because it's just not talked about enough in terms of what the disorder really is versus what some of the stereotypes or some of the misconceptions are about the disorder.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So before we wrap up, Dr. Jones, do you have any last words or final thoughts about the topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we kind of glazed over a lot of things, and in the interest of time, we just kind of glazed over it. But I do want to make sure that people know there's a lot more that goes into it. I definitely do take a deeper dive into narcissism and narcissistic abuse on my podcast, A Date with Darkness podcast. That's completely dedicated to that topic. It's also all over my Instagram and stuff like that. So I just want people to know that just based on the things that I've listed here, that should not be an end-all be-all. There's a lot more things that we didn't get into here. There's a lot more education around that, but there's also a lot of great useful tools out there to do more research and look at those things. So I want to be clear that also this interview is not a substitute for treatment, that people should seek treatment with a licensed mental health professional if they feel like they are experiencing some of these things or having trouble in relationships. Definitely, you know, use this as a stepping stone tool, but definitely, you know, I would support you to look further into the journey and seeing what really is going on and what this is all about.
Okay, wonderful. How can people get in touch with you or find you on social media, or even find your podcast?
Absolutely. But you know, my website has everything, drnataliejones.com. And then, you know, my podcast is also on my website. But if you want to go straight to that, you can go to adatewithdarkness.com and look at that. And, you know, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, again, all under Dr. Natalie Jones, which is also linked through my website as well. So you can find me there, and, you know, writing on the internet, you know, just writing stories and things like that. So I'm all around.
All right, wonderful. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Dr. Jones.
Thank you very much.
Of course, thank you for talking about this very important topic. So I'm going to end the show now, but I just want to say to everyone, thank you again for watching this edition of Managing Anxiety in the Storm. This is a topic that's very important. It's also something that is personally important to me as well. I have personal experience with narcissism. So so thank you for watching, and stay tuned for future episodes. Take care. Bye-bye.